But I think one of your really, really amazing talents, and I love the fact that you got to talk a lot about your ideas, in this conversation, but you're an amazing interviewer and you're able to pull stuff out of people without injecting your thoughts onto every single thing that they're about to say. I think a lot of interviewers don't do that very well. They don't allow the people to talk and say their own words instead of, giving them a pointed question and trying to get them to answer the question that they want to. And
is that a criticism, Kevin? Since
it's
that's
not
what
a
I just did
criticism.
for 20
It's
minutes.
not a criticism.
No, I know.
Yeah, you are an awful interviewer.
Yeah, I know.
But like, what gets you like interested in interviewing? Because you've done a series of interviews on transgenderism. Obviously, you've done more of the woke stuff. Like, what is your interview style? What like, how do you go about scheduling an interview? Do you kind of pick a topic, or is it more of like, all right, this person's available, I think they're interesting, let's set something up? Like, what's your strategy there?
Well, so I mean, if you want to talk about wokeness, like I have a series of conversations on wokeness, or whatever you want to call it, flow, whatever. Like there's always these different terms, and whatever term that we're going to use is going to be problematic in one way or another. But there's different ways to do that. You can talk to an economicist, you can talk to somebody who theorizes about social media, you can talk to somebody who's a sociologist, and there's different people with different sorts of skill sets that can think about things on that level. One of the things that I saw at the Evergreen State College was that you had a bunch of very small thinkers trying to think very big. You had a bunch of people who hadn't figured out how to be a self yet, thinking systemically. And especially the students, but also the professors. Well, the professors they were trained in thinking systemically, but then they tried to turn their classrooms into some sort of psychology experiment or some sort of group therapy session. And then they'd have interpersonal skills to actually like figure out, we're going to summon all this trauma. What do we do with the trauma? I don't know, but we summoned it. And that's what we have to do. Just like leech the wound or something like that. So there's different ways of approaching every different given topic. So if you want to talk about something like you just slice off a pie, I was like, okay, campus culture. That's where I started. Evergreen State College. And then I'm like, well, what's happening over here at this Laurier University up in, where was that? Outside of Toronto in Canada with Lindsay Shepherd and Wilfrid Laurier. And they had a whole dust up that was very similar to the Evergreen State College. You had these professors that were very aggressively authoritarian. And then you had these wacko activists who were standing on behalf of the rights of this entire group of people and acting like total asshats, but they're righteous asshats, which is the worst kind of asshat because it's like a halo made out of poop, And it's like instead of rays of light, there's just like streaming flies and poop lines.
We're going to name this video Halo of Poop. Perfect.
The Halo of Poop. Yeah, this sounds like we're kind of making some sort of death metal album now. Well, okay, so I went from campus culture, and like I went from race relations, which in America is just like, well, it's never going to end. The race thing's never going to end in America. It's too a part of our identity to fighting about it, right? Yeah. And there's too much money wrapped up into it.
Well, the race problem in America is the class problem of Europe. That's why I would say not to get into the post-Marxism ideas, but Marxism focused on on class in Europe, where class is not really a large division, I would say, in America, but race was toward the at the beginning of America. So that's why it manifests itself here in America this way, as opposed to classes fighting. I mean, Bernie Sanders tries to do the class thing, but that dies out pretty fast. So
he gets captured by people who are identitarians anyways, because they have more cachet in that.
That was the Laclau and Moof wrote about that in that Marxist journal about how it was the early 80s. Douglas Murray writes about it in The Madness of Crowds, about how they said that because the middle class people were being raised out of poverty by capitalism. And so they said, we have to expand this out if we're going to see the revolution. So we need the race. Yeah. So, I mean, like my point is, you're right. There is a certain group of people that will always need to keep this thing alive. Otherwise they're not going to get their stupid ass revolution.
It's also, it's not even just, I guess revolution is a part of the American spirit too. We're always saying, screw the man. We're founded on screwing the man. So when a bunch of Americans say, screw the man, and they're talking about America, it's just a part of our blood. Like our founding document was saying, screw you, daddy. Yep. and giving
It's a
daddy
declaration of
the
war.
finger. Yeah, it's a declaration of war. So we're always going to be in that. And then the race thing, it's a terrible, it's really tense. So like you talk about the race thing and you're like, well, there's too much entrenched motivating thinking and all this stuff that's never going to end. So what's something smaller that I can deal with? Okay, let's deal with sex. That's much smaller than race, which you think it would be because it's like much easier to think about. But like the same sort of corrosive postmodern ideology is now saying that there's no such thing as biological sex, right? There's that whole nest of ideas that's ostensibly about this thing called the transgender person or the trans person is just another influential arm of this kind of weird cloud of ideology. I don't know what it actually is. I keep on calling it woke because I don't know what else to call it. But so you pick up a topic like that, like, okay, well, let's start talking about this one little tiny thing called transgenderism, right? So I'm going to interview transgender people, and then I'm going to interview people who detransition. Then I'm going to interview. Somehow I started interviewing all the top researchers in the field. And then you have a bunch of other things that you're watching. You're like, oh, well, there's this whole thing called feminism, which I thought was a terrible thing. But it turns out that there's a lot of nuance in feminist thought, because I was, kind of this anti-feminist kind of Gamergate kind of guy, and love women, but people who represent women. I mean, it's just the same thing over and over again. It's like, here's a bunch of people that are claiming to represent the entire group. And then because they represent the entire group, they can act however they want. And then just solely the name of the group that they're standing for. But you get into that, you're like, okay, well, what is this feminism thing? Actually, there's all these different kinds of feminism, and they're always fighting against each other too. And so you're kind of in a smaller area, but you can still see that there's individuals who are coming into and out of all these ideologies, right? Everybody's like on this, like some people get stuck in an ideology and they become a true believer, or they build so much of a personality that they kind of manifest the ideology. But for the most part, people kind of go through a transit and they kind of either go slow or fast. And I like to find people who have kind of gone into a personhood, and then that personhood breaks for them, and then they have to reinvent themselves. Like that's kind of my American dream, is the person who, basically it's some sort of novelistic archetype of a person going on a quest, thinking that they know what they want, and then they get what they want, and then they're destroyed somehow, and then they understand that they are actually a part of something much greater, and using all of instead of focusing on all the wokeness or all the other things, you focus on what it's doing to the individual. And then you just talk to the individual and you let the individual just talk through it all. And that, like, the Jung quote, people don't have ideas, ideas have people. You can invert that if you listen to people and you allow them to kind of overstand their ideas by putting it in the context of how that influences them and how that allows them to influence others.